I'm very excited to introduce to you
Hi, guys.
our keynote.
I'm just raising my hand to get them quiet.
I'm very excited to introduce to you our keynote speakers, Pam Moran, who is the superintendent of the Albemarle County Public Schools, and Iris Sokol, who is both a New York native, but he's also currently an educational technology and innovation team leader in Albemarle County Public Schools. These guys blow me away every time I hear them talk. They never fail to inspire. I love these guys, so we're really excited to have them here today. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes, I'm on. We actually had somebody come backstage and say, you know, we're picking up all the mics back in the feed. And at that point, Ira and I were having an argument about who gets to do the clicker today. And I kind of think that I always deserve to get the clicker. But, oh man. But it's great to be with you. You know, maker educators rock. And everybody in this room. I think that teachers are ultimate makers because I have to tell you, from the time I first started teaching to the time that I became a superintendent and have been walking in classrooms over and over again, what I see is that teachers are the original DIY. They make everything. They save school districts all over the country billions of dollars probably in what you create that is your work to help our kids be great learners. And I think the big torch passing that we've been doing for the last few years is how do we pass that part of who we are as makers into the world of our children in our classrooms. So Ira and I are going to be doing a real focus on that today. And we're going to be starting with what we believe is one of the critical challenges that we have, whether it's in museums, whether it's in libraries, whether it's in community maker spaces, whether it's in our schools. And that is, how do we reframe the world of making through a lens of social justice and equity and access? So that's where we're going to go. And I want to start by just saying, Chad Ratliff is here in the audience, and Chad is a director. Hey, Chad, how are you? It's good to see you. And Chad's actually here with a speaker you're going to hear a little bit later this morning, who's one of our students, who is Mr. Drone in Albemarle County. But Chad really talks a lot with me and with other people about the idea that education is ultimately a political act. And all of us who have lived through No Child Left Behind certainly understand that. He also talks about the idea that the politics of education often results in this thing that we call policy. And that people like me and school boards often think, or states or federal government think, that policy actually causes teachers to do what they do in classrooms. You know what? That may be one of the best kept secrets of the people who make policy, is that in reality, all of us who are in classrooms know it's not policy that either causes things to happen in classrooms or changes practice. It's about philosophy. It's about our beliefs and it's about our values. And so what we want to talk about today is how we're trying to reframe the idea of who we are through a values-based focus versus a policy or law-based focus. So we want to take it down to that level.
Oops. My clicker isn't... Okay. There we go.
There you go.
None of this is new.
I knew I should have had it.
You know, one of the things that I like to say is that none of this is new. One of my favorite authors about American education was writing in... That's good. Was writing in the 1830s, 1840s, and you know, he described what we would call maker education, and of course Dewey describes what we'd call maker education, and you keep rolling back to it, and we need to roll back to it again, and that's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to tell you sort of a two-level story here, and there are two stories in each thing. There are two ways to think of education, and America has gone back and forth consistently between them. One is to select and sort children, which is what No Child Left Behind is about. Anytime you have a standardized test, anytime you have a grade level standard, you are selecting and sorting children, because you're saying you're not meeting some mythical average. You know, I always talk about the fact that 70% of American kids don't read on grade level. How is that grade level? Who makes those kind of choices? And the other way is to enable individuals and communities to reach their potential. That's a whole different way of looking at it. And we're going to look at this through, oops. We'll get there.
Would you like for me to try?
Yeah. Huh. It's that third slide. There we go. We almost got there.
Are you there?
Can we go back one? You know, we think of things in a lot of different ways, and one of the things from my experience is I was the kind of kid who probably was ready to drop out of high school in 8th grade, drop out of school in 8th grade.
Is this where I ask the audience, is anybody from New Rochelle or know that place?
Oh, closer to the door.
We're
We'll
going to
switch.
trade places.
Okay. There we go. You know, I was that kind of kid who saw no value in school whatsoever. I was lucky enough to stumble into a very early version of what we'd all love to do now, was a alternative high school designed by Neil Postman and some other people. We're trying to look at ways of recreating that kind of environment, that 40 years ago environment today with today's tools for today's kids. And so there's my story, and then there's also the story of something we did this summer, you know, as a grand experiment. Because one of the things we're all trying to do with, you know, maker and social justice is to break down the grammar of schooling, which defeats children, is designed to defeat children. We create time schedules where we say, oh, I'm sorry you're interested in that, but bing, it's time to do something else. You know, oh, you'd like to work with these people, but oh, we have this wall here. You know, oh, you'd like to work with this guy, but he's in a different grade, and so we can't do that. And, you know, I'm sorry, there's no way that like history and literature or science and math could possibly go together because we have different teachers to teach those things. We'll keep working on this. There we go. So we're trying to break down all of those barriers, as was done, you know, for me 40 years ago in a school where, you know, the basic question was, what do you want to do? And this is the question we ask kids now, although we frame it as, what do you want to make? And I may have skipped this race. Okay, we'll keep going back. Okay. Okay. This was said about, a teacher of mine wrote this at a time, you know, the basic thing is we're not trying to replace one structure with another. That's not our goal. We're trying to replace one structure with a set of opportunities for children that allows every child to discover what they want to do. And that requires that we give them time and space and the ability to, you got it?
Can I just knock on the wall?
Right, you just knock on the wall. It's not a, so this is not an issue of, you know, what, kids getting to do exactly what they want. Kids learn in any community about compromise and working together, but the first thing they discover is that they have to challenge themselves to decide what they want to do.
And that, one of the things that we talked about from Postman, I don't know how many people have read Teaching as a Subversive Activity. Some of the old timers like me probably know that book. If you haven't, go download it, which you couldn't have done 40 years ago, and read that book. One of the things they talk about is this idea, Ira. Why is it that schools are expected to duplicate what goes on out in the organizations that are our formal parts of society? Why aren't we teaching those values and those things that kids need to learn that they don't learn anywhere else? And that's...
Yeah. And so we're going to...
I'm working on laser cutting a RC remote control foam model plane. I'm using GIF, and it's going to be laser cut on foam board. And yeah, I started a club here, and I was just seeing how effective like laser cutting and like hand cutting could be. And hand cutting I've been used to doing that. I want to see how laser cutting, how clean it would be on working on foam models.
So we took a group of kids this summer.
Just like designing it, because most of the time, most people get 3-view drawings of like actual airplanes where they just scratch draw it, and you have to like know the techniques to like fold, bend, and all that using the foam board. And that's probably the hardest part. Like also designing it. Like a lot of people use SketchUp or Photoshop, like that.
And you're using...
We can move
right now,
next slide.
Go over the line, so when I laser cut it, it could actually cut through the red and score the blue lines.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
So we said to kids, what do you want to make? We took kids who were already struggling with high school and said, can we get you math credit by doing a project that you're really interested in? Can we get you science credit by doing a project you're really interested in? And we watch kids do incredible stuff. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, time becomes human. You have a couple of weeks to work on something. This is the project. The physical structure. We tear down walls every place we go to try to build things. We're trying to break up that division of students from multi-age spaces at elementary school through zero content, fully mixed content spaces at high school, so that we break through everything. We can get next. And thus we're letting, things disappear. The cultural bias starts to vanish because it's no longer the teacher determining the project the kids are working on. It's the kids building it out of their experience. The teacher-centric classroom vanishes and it becomes a community of learners. Poverty no longer becomes a deficit. We say all the time, kids from poverty don't come to school knowing any less, they just know different. And many of those different are things that we can use and leverage and that the learning community can use and leverage. Disabilities become differences. Everybody chooses different tools to do things.
And one of the things that really strikes me, I was watching a Twitter feed one night, and there was a chat going on, and somebody said, hey, I think that Maker Ed belongs in the wheelhouse of gifted education. Some people think that Maker Ed is all about educating kids who aren't going to have, quote, a chance of doing well in the curriculum as we define it in public schools. The reality is what we're saying is a value system. Every child, whether it's a child of privilege, a child of poverty, a child of color, a child who does have a disability, a child who speaks no English, every one of those kids will benefit because the DNA of making is baked into us as humans, and it is a pathway to learning for all kids, not just for a few, depending upon a person's orientation or value system. We're trying.
Okay, so we're going to play 2 minutes of this video, just 2 minutes quickly.
One of the things that we've discovered is that maker education with kids gets them engaged, gets them passionate about the work, gives them opportunities to pursue things that they're interested in. And And as a result, it really raises the level of work that kids are doing, and it starts to make sense. School makes sense.
This is actually my first year at this school. I thought this would be a great program that they're doing here, letting you build your own stuff and have more freedom than other schools. I feel like I'm learning way more doing this.
When we tell students what to do, all they're learning is to comply with us. But there's nothing more powerful to build that sense of intrinsic motivation than making something that really matters to you.
And these are your analog pins. This is my picture helper. It has 11 lasers right here on your side and 7 lasers on the bottom right here. And they both shoot up into some photoresistors right here.
The 6th grade, we really struggled. He struggled in science and math a little bit last year.
Usually I just wake up and be like, why do I want to go to school? All we're going to do is sit in a class. Mr. Redder in the technology room says, learn with your hands. And I built the entire code by myself. I'm pretty proud because I didn't think I could get anything of this caliber done.
That really lit a fire under him. I knew he had it in him, but I just didn't think I'd see it so quickly. You know, it's kind of open your eyes a little bit, like there are other ways of doing things.
We can jump to the next slide.
He's just.
And this kid has now got picked up by a venture capital firm in Colorado. He's developing this product.
But here's the other important part of that video I wanted to share with you. At the very time that Edutopia was making this video, did you catch the kid Ali in the beginning? At the very time that Ali was talking to Edutopia about his work, there was this kid, a Muslim kid down in Texas, who built a clock at home and brought it to school and ended up getting in significant trouble and all over the national news about the fact they thought that he had built something that was likely maybe a device of some sort to harm people in school. So you think about, what is it that we do that says we want to honor what kids are doing, to experiment, to really figure out where they're going to go, and that has to be independent of all of the biases that we sometimes bring to our work about who our children are. So I just want to keep that in mind. We can get this to move on.
Next slide.
Thanks, guys. Keep going.
So, you know, and we'll skip some of this to get back on time. We can keep going for a minute here.
This
Next
is all
slide.
in the movie.
This is all the movie. But, okay, next slide. Yep.
All right, so I got to tell you the story of Josh. So we've built out a new way of thinking about high schools, and we're doing something that we call prototyping, which is that we're test bedding in our regular high school different ways of approaching the work. So one of the things that we've done is we built out what we call a teams approach, where we have our teachers, instead of dividing up time into math and science and social studies and English, what they're doing is they're teaming as a team of 4 content areas with inputs from our folks that may be running maker studios, music or media or engineering labs. Here's what happens. Those kids who are coming into 9th grade, kids that represent high diversity, oftentimes kids that maybe have not been successful in school are in that mix, and they spend 3 hours every day with those 4 teachers in a project maker-based environment. They're doing all kinds of cool things. Josh, who was one of those kids, is being featured in a movie that's being made by Ted Dintersmith right now, Most Likely to Succeed background. And one of the things that's pretty interesting about Josh is he's a kid coming out of 8th grade into 9th grade, had significant issues in school, bumped around, placed in a foster family. He lands in Team 19, which is the year he would graduate. And all of a sudden you find a kid who was barely surviving in school. In fact, defined himself as, I will likely be a dropout kind of kid. Josh becomes empowered, motivated by being able to make and to make sense of all those other content areas in an interdisciplinary way through making and projects and passions that he had. He met with a representative from a little group called Student Voice that's on Twitter, #StudVoice if you don't know them. And in talking at that group about what high schools of the future should be like. He got an invite to come to the White House just a few weeks ago to speak at the Next Gen White House High School gathering. And here's what's so empowering for me, is Josh got up and he said, I once thought of myself as a dropout, possibly. Now I think of myself as being possibly a technical engineer. That's what we can do when we empower our kids and we see beyond the ways that schools have always sorted and selected and see that potential in all children.
So we look at all sorts of ways kids can make sense. Can we play this?
Hi, my name is Elijah. We came here to talk to teachers about our projects, and it was pretty fun. We got our own ideas. We actually got more to add on. Yeah, pretty much.
And what's your project, Isaiah?
Well, me and him were working on a baseball bat. That's just pretty much a simple thing, like a baseball bat.
So you were at different tables. Tell me what was it like?
Oh, well, my name is Josh, and coming over here, I was like really shy at first because I didn't know any of the teachers at my table, but they started talking to me, like, started having jokes and like giving me great ideas for my bat, and like I got a lot more thinking going on my bat now, and I just have a lot more to add on to it.
So are you guys going to really build this bat?
Yeah.
Because you're in a special program this summer for people that are entrepreneurs that have an idea that you want to turn into reality. So design, make, launch. You're going to make your bat. Fabulous. It's great to see you. Thank you, guys. This was great because our teachers were working with PBL Work, and we had close to 300 teachers together. The kids are doing their version of maker work over at one of our high schools. We brought our kids over to pitch their work to the teachers and get feedback, and then we turned it around and the teachers had to pitch their project that they were building for kids this fall back at these kids and get feedback from them. So we basically built a PLC that was about kids and teachers together.
And I want you to think about every bit of math and science that goes into somebody making a custom baseball bat for a player.
Physics.
Just the material science, the mathematics of the weight and the balance and the investigation. These were incredible things. But we like this to spread lots of ways. We can play this. This is quick.
There we go.
There we go.
Why am I changing it?
Because it's not fair to the woman.
I think it's just fine.
It's not fair.
I think it's fine.
Alright, put another one right here.
Here.
Okay, what do you have to say?
Now it's fair, but it wasn't fair when it says Master's Craftsman's Shop, because it wasn't fair to the women's or girls.
So all sorts of things happen when you put kids in control of their environment and the place they are. And again, it's going back to, this was written by one of my teachers in 1974, because this is about opportunities. It's about creating opportunities, and for us, it's about closing the opportunity gap. And it's about closing the opportunity gap in all sorts of ways, because we're in, and we'll show you a map later, we're in a school district that's twice the physical size of the city of New York, with a lot fewer people. The Appalachian Trail is our western boundary. We have mountains and hollers and all the things.
And an urban ring.
And a very urban ring. Pam, you want to tell this story quickly?
A little bit. So one of the things that we always are trying to do is to break down our kids' picture of that the place where they live is not like necessarily the rest of the world. So we try to get our kids to not be place-bound. In fact, this week, we've had kids Skyping into Mexico City and Ireland and all over the world, and that happens all over our school division. But we had a project last year that was kind of fun. We had 2 schools where we had teachers who said, what would it look like if we had our kids do one of those really cool problem-solving projects? And what if it involved Minecraft? Because we're really into Minecraft in Albemarle County. So what they got together and did looks something like this. The kids in an urban ring school, high poverty, Title I school, and kids in a rural school, also more moderated, diverse school, but also Title I, built teams of kids who can, in response to a problem, which was, you're living on an island in Minecraft that has water, and you're living on an island that does not. How might you solve the problem of getting water from one island to the next? And the kids got together and they spent, again, getting rid of the idea of time-bound learning. They spent an entire morning figuring out what they wanted to do. They decided to build a bridge starting from each side, and they built the bridge towards each other until they were able to meet it in the middle and move water from one island to the next. Here's what I think about that is so darn important for our kids today. Our generation of kids that are in schools now and the ones that will be coming are going to be faced with some of the most significant problems of the world that we've ever faced as humanity. And when we can have kids start to work together across diverse cultures, diverse places, diverse spaces, and figure out how to come up with solutions by using a maker mindset, we're going to solve problems of the world. So we want our kids to get together and see the value of diversity in being creative problem solvers. Again, it's what's advanced civilization across time, has been that kind of work.
So, you know, in one of our middle schools, what began as an optics project, which was the teacher saying to kids, you have to forget Google Cardboard, you have to build your own headsets for virtual reality, which they did out of all sorts of materials, from 3D printed to wood cuts and stuff. But the kids quickly then said, well, we don't want to just watch these, we want to make these. So we have children who are now, they're in the final things of editing. The very first tour of Thomas Jefferson's home done in VR. That,
by 7th graders?
7th graders. We can play this for just a second, maybe like 20 seconds of this. You know, it's a full virtual reality. They had to move in and, you know, and do everything and control this with a how many cameras, Chad? 14, something like that, you know, which they're now editing. Imagine editing 14 videos together.
But the coolest thing the kids also had to do, and this is about communication, which is a form of making as well, they had to convince Monticello to let them in with cameras, because Monticello wouldn't let pretty much anybody in this room
in. They don't allow
in
photography,
and
right.
do any photography, but these kids got there.
We have music construction studios, as we call them, in all of our high school libraries and now moving into our middle school libraries, because making music is one of the most fundamental things our kids love to do. And there's a world of experience there. It brings kids together.
Our teachers have discovered poets that we had never seen in our schools.
Just like a minute or so of this. Yeah.
What was that?
So he took an empty room, gave it to these people. This was made 13 days later.
I walked into the library looking for a book.
And I saw some people in here, like with the microphones, and it looked, I was so interested. I just walked in, and it was amazing.
Play it back like.
Okay.
Can you get over there? There you go. Great.
You know, and this is amazing because it brings kids who come to school just for this event. And Mr. Brooklyn Nets was a kid who had spent a little time in
Brooklyn
and in some more secure facilities, and was entering his high school senior year with what we call verified credit in Virginia. Yeah. This music studio so turned him on, he graduated on time.
So one of the things that we say is that when kids get an opportunity to pursue things that they love in school and make it a part of the learning, not apart from, as this child did, Kalyan, what it does is it kept him coming back to school every day. And not just coming back to school, he would come at 7 in the morning and stay until we kicked him out. And now he's in community college. How cool is that? Let me tell you about Ayawati. Ayawati is a cool kid, and she has a dream to be an engineer. And she goes to her teacher, and she says to her teacher, you know, I really think that girls in middle school don't really have an understanding that engineering actually could be fun and interesting and cool to do. And so the teacher said, well, what would you like to do, Ayawati? And she said, I'd like to do something with middle school girls. He says, well, go figure out what you want to do and come back and let me know. And so she did. She came back and she said, I want to run a summer bridge building camp for middle school girls. She recruited some friends. She set it up. She got donations from Lowe's of wood. And she and her friends who were in high school took the middle school girls and they spent some of the week actually teaching design thinking around bridge building. But they had identified a project on a walking trail down along the Rivanna River in Albemarle County and a place where you couldn't get across a little creek running into the river, and particularly was something that would be a barrier for people who were disabled to be able to use that trail. So they spent the week taking the wood, taking tools, hauling them down in the woods to that creek, and they built a bridge across the creek. I said to her, I said, you know, I wake up one morning and I see this story on the news, and you know, when a superintendent sees their schools on the news, you kind of always check in. I was like, okay, I need to find out more about this project. So I tracked Ayawati down and I said, so tell me more about this. What were you thinking? And what she said was so important to me. And she said, well, this was about helping middle school girls understand that engineering can be fun. And I knew that if they got to make something, that it would really hook them. But the other part that she said was, I wanted to also do something that would be good for the community, that would have social good about it. And so they did. This past summer, they built their second bridge, second group of middle school girls. I don't know how many of those girls will see engineering as something they want to do in life, but one of the things that Ayawati said, when you get people together and they do something good for their community, that in itself is really worth great value to us. So, pretty cool story.
One of the things we talk about a lot that's really important is that schools need to take risks. Making is all about risk. Will you risk, you know, putting your idea out there and your skills out there to try to do something? And there are all sorts of levels of risk. There's the risk of, as our director of instruction said to me one day, Ira, did I just sign off on circular saws for elementary schools? And I said, yeah, it seems to have your name on it, Debbie. You know, I don't know anything about
I'm not
this.
taking credit for
right.
that one.
But if we play this for a minute, this is about a high school where boys have become the main choreographers of dance, if we could play this.
Well, maybe.
And students become the directors, and they do the music, and they're willing to tackle not the standard high school musical.
Particularly in Virginia, when I saw the flyers for You're in Town.
So listen up. Any second those cops are gonna bust in here and bust us up like a bunch of overripe cannibals. So I say, as long as our juice has got to spill over this floor here, her juice has got to spill too.
And it's here in a hole on the land with our hearts full of fear. What a rhythm, what a jam. You know, cops will be here.
We've got time.
I know. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. And
now, what's cool about this school is that they have a drama teacher, and she's actually from up in these parts too.
Yeah,
I think she's
a New
another
Yorker.
Brooklynite. We do. Some people say that Charlottesville is the sort of New York City of Virginia. I don't think it's quite there, but oh well. When we get matzo balls there, we'll know. But here's what she does. She turns the whole work that kids do with musicals over to them. They choreograph. They basically direct the music. When you go in there, you don't see an adult running the show. You see kids doing it. And that is a different version of making.
You know, so we believe in creating an environment that allows kids to take these risks every day, you know, to open up to the world. And so we're going to tell you one last key story here because it's really important. And it talks about risk and it talks about culture, and thus it's ultimately about values in schools. So we have a rural middle school. Virginia calls its standardized tests SOLs because they want to be completely honest about
truth in advertising.
What's going on. So leading into the SOL week, you know, I said to the principal, we have an opportunity to bring this sort of architect down. He works with kids on iterative design. And she said, well, you know, we're preparing for the state test. And I said, Allison, your kids are going to do badly on the state test no matter what we do. So who cares? You know, you have free reign because we're not going to be okay anyway.
So Ira comes to me. Now let me tell you, as a superintendent, he comes in and goes, we want to bring Alex Gilliam a public workshop down and have him work with these kids, and they're going to redesign the cafeteria dining experience. Well, I have in my head, some people have heard this story maybe, I have in my head cafeteria designing experience looks like the kids might go into their makerspace and build some booths and, you know, maybe bring some plants in, maybe put some things up on the wall. And then all of a sudden I start to see these images showing up on Instagram and Twitter. And I call Ira. I hear power tools in the background, and I said something like, what the heck is going on down there? He said they didn't want to build booths, Pam, they wanted to build tree houses.
So you can't build a tree house without going and getting the tree first, which requires chainsaws, of course. But this was turning it over to kids, and so she goes down there, I leave, she comes down, I get a text that says, Ira, there are kids like 18 feet up in the air. And I said, yes. And
he had told me that they might be 14.
She said, you told me they'd be 8 feet. I said 12. You know, but these kids, this involved every kid in the school. They worked for 2 weeks, building, tearing down what they didn't like, building again, handling all these tools and equipment. Can we just play this just quick in the background, just so we get the noise? This is all going on in the cafeteria.
While there's a poetry slam.
The way the school changed because of this was unbelievable. The power of what this does for children's sense of ownership, not to mention their math skills, their communication skills, their abilities to do stuff.
So I get in the car and drive down to see this, and I go in and I'm watching this and thinking, okay, you know, I try to do this thing called getting to yes, but I was really looking at this through the lens of what about the liabilities? What about this? What about that? The principal caught my attention with a math teacher when she said, Pam, step back, let me tell you about these kids. There's kids up there who are who have learning disabilities. There are kids that are really struggling in math. There are girls there who are doing things that they never thought that they would be able to do. And there are kids from all over our school working together. And the math teacher said, Pam, these kids are doing math that I never thought they'd learn to do. And I stepped back and I thought, well, let me call the lawyer next. And I called him. He said, so we have a cool lawyer. He said, get it inspected, figure out if there's anything you need to do. We had to do a little more bracing. But he said, if you do that and you really set up the rules well with the kids, you're good to go. So that's what we did. We now have 2 rolling tree houses in this cafeteria.
And where there's an 8-foot drop at one point, there is a sign that says, not the way down. So we're going to flash through this quickly, and we're going to get the Peggy. We take makerspaces seriously. We invest in them. We put it. We don't have a lot of money, but we redirect money so it makes sense to support stuff.
One of Ira's favorite slides.
Right, yeah. In fact, you know, we actually tore down the wall between the shop and the hallways in one high school. So to just let it flow in. But we also believe very firmly that every place is a makerspace, and our kids work wherever, you know, they need to go and they need to be to create things. And we want to talk through this just very quickly. I know Peggy's anxious, but we'll bet there. We have this term that Pam developed called Yelp, and you know, it's our thing of finding ways to meet student needs on a continuous thing. So when someone comes to us, our whole leadership is built on the idea of getting to yes. When a teacher or a student comes to us, we want to make sure we're going to figure out a way to make their goals happen. And so, you want to?
Yeah, so here's what I believe in. And I have to tell you that this is the antithesis oftentimes of what people who run school divisions or districts do. And that is that I have a real belief that we get to yes. Somebody has an idea, what you want to do is to try to give them a chance to do it, because if you don't, they'll go out, and not only will they not come back to you with an idea again, they'll tell 10 other people that you didn't say yes, and those 10 people won't come in either. So getting to yes. A lot of times people think that superintendents are all about no. I'm about yes. The other piece is that I'm a real believer in engaging teams. So Julian, who's here, is a student, as important a leader in our school system as I am. So flattening the hierarchy and putting everybody at the table to help build the work, to make the work, is really critical to me. So engaging teams is critical. The other piece is leveraging resources. We're like pretty much everybody in the country. We're pretty much an average per pupil expenditure school system in the United States, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 plus. A lot of people in this area have much higher per pupils than we do. We've stayed the same basically since 2007-8 with the recession, but what we've learned to do is to change the way we use our resources, because we can spend money on all kinds of programs to bring in to help kids pass tests, or we can redirect those funds to help our kids get engaged, excited, interested, and doing the work that will allow them to have all kinds of pathways open to their dreams. And then lastly, we're a prototype place. We do an aim small, miss small model where we say, let's not make the mistake of a Los Angeles and go buy iPads for everybody and not think about what might happen. Instead, let's prototype. Let's try small pieces of this work. So when Dale and I first started talking about whether a school could actually become a place where making is something that is valued, we started small, and it's been 6 or 7 years of working to make it go viral across the system so that all of our kids in every school have spaces where they can find the opportunity to make.
So I want to end with sort of
this is our end, Peggy.
A call to people, especially if there are people, you know, with foundations, with organizations and stuff, is we need, in order for making to reach all the kids and to move all kids forward, it needs to be in classrooms, it needs to be in core subjects, it needs to be part of English and math and science and history, and not a special time zone. It needs to be in the school day, not just after school. After school is cool and it's great, but it leaves out a whole bunch of kids, as we sort of know. It needs to be fully embedded in secondary. We see in a lot of places, a lot of cool stuff happens in elementary and then it drifts away because we got to get kids past the tests. But it's got to be in secondary so it carries through and it makes sense to kids. And it's got to be for real credits, so it's part of kids' real life. You know, it just has to be something that is a belief system of the school itself, that this is the way kids learn. We're public school people, and there are lots of different ways to education, but the one place in the United States, in a splintering society, the one place in the United States that all sorts of groups come together is in public schools. It's the only place where we can really affect opportunity.
And I will end by just saying that for me, public education defines what the Statue of Liberty is all about. In fact, I call our schools Statue of Liberty schools, because those of you who work in public schools know we take everybody in and we do the very best we can to serve them. I just want to say hats off to all of you educators in the audience, whether you're in an organization like NYSCI, whether you're in a charter school, whether you're in a regular public school, a museum, a library, it doesn't matter. If you are helping educate children in this century for their future, you are a part of a movement, and we need to free our schools and make making matter, because our kids matter and you matter. Thank you.
I'm sorry to cut them short, but I was really thinking of all of you because I'm sure you guys have questions.
Absolutely. Chad, Julian, come on up.
Yeah.
Come on up and join us.
Here, Rose, can you? This person right here. So we're going to have a couple of microphones. So Rose is going to have a microphone, and then Jessica, I think, is going to come around and have another microphone.
Julian, I'm glad to see that you're dressed for the occasion.
You can tell the difference between students and administrators.
All right, questions?
My question is, I was thinking of arts as a major component of training for being great makers. How do you see the arts as relating to the maker movement? And is that involved, do you ever incorporate a discussion of that when you approach schools to create maker spaces?
The question was about arts involved in, do they ever use the arts and talk about that as involved in making?
You know, we've worked very hard to include the arts at every level, and that's visual arts and performing arts, and all sorts of things. We've done a few things that we think are essential to this. In a number of our elementary schools, we've found ways to join our libraries and our art rooms together. In one renovation we just did, they share the same space. We have built maker spaces as adjuncts to the art rooms to go with them. One of the things that I really like about our school system is that we've kept arts programming at full bore through all the cuts that we've had to make. So we think it's a really essential part of it. We want to make sure that arts is choice-based on the students' part, that these are not directed projects that happen. So if you go into our elementary art rooms, you'll see kids working on 20 different things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you can't separate any of the content. So if we've got kids working in history, and they're making movies, or they're doing an artistic representation of something that they want to share, we see arts as being a part of everything we do. But I also think that arts for art's sake matters. And one of the things I'm always looking for is, how do arts teachers turn what sometimes looks like pattern art into making art? And so we really go after the idea that arts has to be something that has an originality of idea to it, which is what making, in my mind, is all about. And that's where we see some of our choice-based artwork as fitting into that. But we see music, our music studios, our media production studios, kids writing scripts for their own dramatic performances, all kinds of ways. Our rap musicians, our musicians that are constructing music of all kinds. It's just, in my mind, it's just a way of life. Other questions?
Other questions? So
yes.
Right here, Jessica's going to hand you a microphone. Okay.
High school senior at Frontier High School in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
I'm recording this to play back to my superintendent.
Fantastic.
How do I make my superintendent convinced that this is the future? How can I make
Julian, you got that one, Julian.
How do we convince other superintendents that this is the future?
Julian,
So
jump in there.
That's a wonderful question, and that's one that I think that I found myself asking several years ago. And as you can tell, we've obviously made significant progress and continue to do so. I think that the best way to do that is to be genuine. Whatever you're passionate about, whatever you have an interest in, if you can show that to your teachers, to your administrators, to your superintendent, then that will come across, and they will see how passionate you are about it, and eventually it will connect to your learning. And by doing that, you can convince them that this is something that has true potential and true value to the future of education.
You know, and I'll add something that Pam and I were talking last night about Chad. No, you know.
Sorry, Chad.
but you know, she said, you know, one of the differences was Chad was in a traditional high school and did as little as possible, you know, chasing a very traditional thing. I was in a completely non-traditional high school, and while it probably didn't look like I was doing anything in particular, that I was never in class or things like that, I was working really hard on
Well, you
things.
had a teacher who dropped you off at a subway at middle of the night
to
do an anthropology study?
Yeah, we interviewed the homeless in the subway stations at midnight. But, you know, it was, people worked incredibly hard. And I think what Julian is saying is that's what we have to show, is you have to show that what this shifts is, instead of kids sitting there bored to death in class, you're doing real work. And kids offered the opportunity to do real work will work unbelievably hard.
And I would say that one of the most important things you can do is realize that your voice matters. I say this about our kids all the time, that kids who find their voice, either if they find it on their own, or they find it hopefully with the support of teachers, or they just bring their natural voice to the work. Julian would be an example. He tells me he's going to maybe run for school board. Is that right? Did I hear that for real?
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, Michael Moore did that. Voice, agency, a belief that you can make a difference, and beyond that, influence, because you have that as a student. And you just call up the superintendent's office and say, hey, I'd like to make an appointment. And you know what? If you keep calling, eventually you'll get that appointment and get in there and talk about what you believe needs to change and enlist your friends. And some people might think that's heresy, but I got to tell you, I got kids all the time. I had 2 kids contact me because they didn't like the way that their school was interpreting the use of cell phones because we're BYOD. So we went and sat down with the principal recently and had a conversation about it. And the kids are going to come up with an idea to try to really shift so that cell phones will maybe be viewed a little differently by some of the teachers in the school. So use your voice because you have influence, and get your friends enlisted.
Another question.
Is that a bad thing
back
to say?
there?
That's good.
Rose, can you get this? Sorry.
Teacher voice?
Absolutely.
All right. We talk about creating authentic learning opportunities for our students, and this is fantastic. We're from New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, just north of Maine. Anyway, this is happening, and what we find is our post-secondary institutions, our universities and our colleges are very quickly looking at our students who are 12, 13, and 14 years old and saying, uh-oh, we're behind the times. So I'm just curious,
Yes.
are you having those similar conversations? And when we talk about providing authentic learning opportunities, are your post-secondary institutions looking and saying, uh-oh?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I actually sit on the State Board of Higher Education in Virginia. And so there are those conversations going on. But I'm going to tell you the most important one going on in Virginia right now. We just had a huge gathering of educators from across Virginia because we are shifting to more of a performance authentic based assessment system. And here's what our state superintendent said to a gathering of educators just like you. He said, the last time that we developed tests in Virginia, you were the victims. This time you need to be the authors. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. And authorship for us means, how do we ensure that our kids can show what they're able to do, not just what they know on a multiple choice test? But our state, certainly in higher education, we are seeing, I was just up at VCU and went into a library that has an entire floor devoted to an innovation zone. and was told by the person running the innovation zone in the library, but this is just a small part of who we are. Every department at VCU has maker spaces and innovation spaces for kids to work on project-based learning. We see that in engineering chat at the University of Virginia. We're hearing about, you've got MIT that's saying we want digital portfolios turned in that show what kids can make. I think that it's starting to move. I think that higher ed has a long way to go to catch up with what's going viral in PK-12 right now. But I think we're seeing this as a movement as people realize we're not going to build a nation's future on how kids did on tests. We're going to build our nation's future on what our kids can make, do, design, invent, engineer, produce, create across everything. And I'll go back to the arts question. I love that the president of Ireland said just a few years ago that the bandwidth of a nation's success can be measured by its culture and what its culture values and how important the arts are in that.
And I'd also like to recognize if Micah and Sean could raise your hands from Arizona State. They would be great folks to talk to.
Oh, yeah. Where's our Arizona State guys?
Yeah, they're there.
So are you guys moving? Yeah, moving pretty quickly ahead of the pack in terms of maker work?
Yeah, well, I'd say we're both in the engineering education world, and
so we both come from the world of engineering education, where we're trying to bring making into higher education. And what a lot of engineering programs are starting to move toward is, instead of having 3.5 years of math and science classes and then maybe a capstone design class at the end, they're starting to integrate project-based learning throughout the entire curriculum. Now, that's a slow process. There's still, because of the roots of engineering are still in that math and science, that's still very important, and people have to have a solid foundation. But schools like Olin College, and I notice we have somebody on a panel later on from Olin, as well as ASU Polytechnic and Harvey Mudd College, they're looking at these project spines where you have students learning how to make in makerspaces in their freshman year, and then starting to do design in the developing world in, say, sophomore year. Junior year, they tend to specialize into some sort of discipline that may look a little more traditional, like electrical, mechanical, robotics, and then in the senior year, usually they're doing things that are either industry-sponsored or sponsored by community. And so that's the direction that we're heading. We still have a long way to go, but I have to say, we would love to have all of your students come to our schools, because that preparation is phenomenal.
And I'll just add, as a final aside on this, it was wonderful that a little earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Education invited us to come up to Washington and talk to the deans of a whole bunch of teacher education institutions about how to develop teachers who could work with this kind of world. So people are recognizing this quickly.
So awesome. Well, I know we have a zillion questions.
Maybe take one more.
Okay, one more.
One more.
She's
Go for it.
she's had her hand up from go. So.
We just completed a unit on paper circuitry, which was a huge success using copper foil and 1206 LEDs. My question is, you mentioned this being a class for credit. How do you deal then with assessment?
Chad. What is your name? Is it Chad? We have a principal that is just like.
So
I'm
actually,
sorry.
For greater thoughts on assessment, Stephanie Chang of Maker Ed and I have a piece that's in Edutopia. You can read through that. But the big idea is ultimately you're deciding what's the key question is what's worth assessing in the first place. We too often have this conversation, particularly around making, is how do you assess content in making? That's the wrong question. It's what's worth assessing in the first place. And it's through the social justice lens and equality lens that you heard earlier, it really is about what is the value in the process. It's really about what's the value in empowering youth, and then how might we document that in some way. We like, if to get technical about it, we work with portfolios a lot, particularly with Indiana University and Maker Ed on the Open Portfolio Project. We have performance tasks throughout our division in which we are measuring and documenting lifelong learner competencies, which are our targets for learning versus just minimum level content. So it really is all about the ability to learn how to learn that we value is the most important thing. And I'm happy to talk more.
And I always just think, I worked with a school system in Michigan, a rural school system, and I still remember the superintendent said to me, he was in this very small school, so he was in a meeting with 6th grade teachers who were complaining about this group of boys who could not get the 6th grade math content. He said, but then he was driving home and he watched them laying out the foundation for a building on their farm. Said, so somebody was failing, but it wasn't the boys. And that's, you know, Chad works very closely with, you know, one of Chad's jobs is to make sure we're on the right side of the state. You know, so.
Not always
easy, right? You know, but. You know, it is one of the things that people, when you look at what grades are like, especially in secondary school, you see that grades are mostly about behavior and compliance. You know, you did your homework, you did those 12 problems that meant nothing to you. You know, if you take that all away, what do you have left? And what is it you're interested in?
And I will tell you, Julie and I have talked about grades and who he is as a learner and what teachers can see or not see based on the tests that you take. And you've had some real angst about that.
Yeah. I would not call myself a stellar student. I've struggled academically, and with just 2 years ago, kind of exploring what I'm passionate about and really reaching out to my teachers and my administrators about really what I wanted to do in school as opposed to what the classes were telling me to do, really helped me to see connections in the curriculum that I could not see before, and because of that, I'd say that I've vastly improved. And I think it's really thanks to the opportunities that are provided by the new mindset of, oh, we can connect you with what you want to do and at the same time allow you to be in this acceptable realm of what we need to do for your education. And I think that's really going to shift so that students have a lot more opportunities to explore what they're interested in their education.
I hate to cut this off. Thank you so much, everybody. I hate to cut them off. They'll be around. So thank you. Thank you again. Yeah.